In an unprecedented escalation, Houthi strikes target El Anad airbase. Joint forces managed to defend Houthi rebels' attacks in Hodeidah. Because of their constant construction to peace efforts, increasing international calls to isolate Houthi rebels. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Roshan Fouad. Houthi rebels have carried out several attacks this morning using drones and ballistic missiles on Al Anad military base. According to sources, at least 45 soldiers were killed and more than 60 were wounded in the Houthi strikes.
Houthi rebels carried out several attacks this morning using drones and ballistic missiles on Al Anad military base in Lahaj, 70 kilometers north of the southern port city of Aden. According to sources, at least 45 soldiers were killed and more than 60 were wounded in Houthis attacks.
Nearly after the breakfast, we heard an explosion in the hangar of the first company. The second was behind a broken down tank. The third was in same camp. Surely it's a Houthi attack, a drone attack.
Several bodies were carried to Lahaj main hospital, yet it's unclear if civilians were also among the casualties. Meanwhile, Ministry of Health mentioned that tens of casualties have arrived to hospitals and orders were made to all hospitals to raise their state of urgency.
At the moment, the number of victims could have reached more than 30. The hangar that had most of the damage is belonging to the first company.
The first international reaction over the attack came from the Swedish Foreign Minister. She said that the attack is shocking, demanding for an immediate ceasefire and restoring to the political process. The Arab Parliament condemned Houthis' attack and warned that Houthis could increase attacks in Yemen in the future. The Parliament said that efforts and decisions must be taken to ward off these terrorist attacks that threaten international and regional peace and security. The Arab Parliament assumed Houthis' full responsibility for blocking all efforts to solve the crisis in Yemen. The attacks came at a time when peace talks have stalled after parties in Yemen failed to reach a compromise deal.
Government forces deterred Houthi rebels' advancement attempt in northwest of El Dala. According to military sources, the militia tried to push reinforcements towards Batar front. However, the artillery forces targeted these reinforcements and caused severe losses among the rebels. In Ma'rib, government forces backed by the national resistance thwarted a Houthi attack in Haid al-Ahmad south of the city. Military sources confirmed that the forces stopped an infiltration attempt made by the militia and caused death to all the elements. Also, the coalition jets destroyed 2 Houthi armed vehicles in Rahba front west of the city. In Hodeidah, joint forces stopped Houthi attacks and caused direct losses within the rebels' elements in 2 frontiers. It was reported that joint forces thwarted the militia's movements in 16th Kilo and El Dorahimi areas, causing massive losses in terms of deaths and equipment. Meanwhile, Houthi militia shelled residential villages in El Tuhaita district, south of the city, causing fear and panic among civilians. Houthis continue to reject all peace effort proposals, while the government stresses its consistent stand and commitment to making peace and stop the war which led to the ongoing suffering of Yemenis. In the meantime, it is obvious that the international community is holding Houthis responsible for blocking peace. This report has more on this story.
The isolation of the Houthi seems to increase day by day, as the international community stressed that the demands of these militias have thwarted efforts to achieve peace in Yemen. The Yemeni government renewed its interest to end the conflict that caused the worst humanitarian crisis and led to waves of displacement of millions of the country's population. The government informed the United Nations that it's ready to provide all support to the new UN Special Envoy Hans Grundenberg to resume the political process and reach a comprehensive political solution to end the war. Also, the government demanded to continue the efforts made during the previous period and build on it, but not to create new ideas and initiatives that prolong the suffering of the Yemeni people. Their response to all peace options, endeavors, and efforts to end the war, in order to maintain the security, unity, and stability of Yemen and alleviate human suffering, the government added. Meanwhile, the Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations for Political and Peace Affairs confirmed that the conditions set by the Houthi militia made barriers to peace talks in accordance with the UN plan, in spite of the concessions made by the government to spare the blood of Yemenis and reach a comprehensive political settlement. With the government's recognition that the Yemeni people can no longer tolerate more hardship, the Houthi militia persists its aggression against the country's infrastructure. The Houthis' continuous obstinacy and arrogance by rejecting all regional and international initiatives to bring peace have worsened the humanitarian crisis, not to mention its military escalation against cities and camps for the displaced. The Yemenis' frustration due to the militia's positions rejecting the peace plan drawn up by the United Nations did not stop the bet on the international community carrying out its responsibilities by putting actual pressure through firm measures and force the militia to engage in the peace process to end the military escalation. It seems clear that voices for the Houthi international isolation is gaining ground.
Rust Foundation for Rights and Freedom revealed that it documented 40,506 violations and humanitarian crimes committed by the Houthi militia against civilians in Al-Mahwid between September 2014 and July 2021. A report by the organization revealed that violations and crimes committed by the Houthi militia vary between killing, torture, displacement, kidnapping, enforced disappearance, recruitment of children, theft of employee rights, assault, and looting of public and private property. UN Organization for Human Rights called on Houthi rebels to release 2 academic professors who are held in Ib. Reports reveal the two professors are still being held by the Houthi rebels in Ib for commenting on social media. Miyun alerted all parties in the conflict of Yemen that freedom of speech to be respected. Coming next. Major challenges facing Yemen amid war.
ثالث جديد على منطقة الروضة، استهدف الأطفال الأبرياء اللي يلعبوا في الشارع، يدعي للسلام يقول له السلام يقتل أطفالنا، يقاتل أطفالنا الأبرياء.
أنا قلت افتجعت ولا قلنا يقع واحد صاروخ ثاني، طلعت البيت حقنا. عشان أنا ألعب أنا وأصحابي والصاروخ انطرح.
Welcome back. Yemen is a country on the brink of collapse. The story started when the Houthi rebels stormed the capital Sana'a in 2014. Everything then changed: the political scene, the humanitarian conditions, the living standards, and the economic situation. The following report tracks the challenges that Yemen has faced since the start of the war.
Yemen is a country on the brink of everything. The story in the country may be recounted from the moment when Houthi rebels stormed the capital Sana'a in 2014 and controlled the city. All realities then had changed: the political scene, the humanitarian conditions, the living standards, and the economic situation. Houthi-induced war in Yemen was backed by Iran, which is an arch foe for many powers in the region. Talking about the region, which is located in the middle of the world, necessitates talking about the powers behind this conflict, those behind the scenes power, or even the open and frank ones who nurtured the continuity of the bloodbath in Yemen. Summarizing the political picture in Yemen could have the Houthis rebels on one hand against the legitimate government, which moved the capital to Aran on the other hand. The Houthi rebels, backed by Iran's mentality and capabilities, press on in their drive to control Yemen's land, economy, and people. They center in the far northwest of the country, in Sa'da, and they moved to the capital Sana'a, driving ahead, trying to enter the strategic governorate of Ma'rib in order to ensure their dominance over the country's heavyweights. Economically, the Houthi rebels are sapping and tapping people's livelihoods and even the humanitarian assistance that is handed over to the poor Yemenis through shocking the Hudaydah port on the Red Sea and through their unjust war that inflicts everyone in Yemen with suffering and hardships. All in the country are suffering: children, women, displaced, workers, and employees. The destruction is everywhere. Millions of children in Yemen are at risk of death, injury, starvation, and disease. The war in the country has caused widespread hunger and poverty, leaving millions of children in dire need for food, and they are suffering from malnutrition. Indeed, more than 16 million of Yemenis will face high levels of acute food shortage, with an estimated 21,000 children are at risk of falling into famine. As to women, the telling mounts where the country lies at the bottom of gender disparity index. The Yemeni women are suffering from male dominance, torture, and hard life conditions. According to United Nations figures, conflict in Yemen has killed nearly 250,000. Those displaced due to the war reached about 4 million, and the country is a scene indeed for the largest humanitarian crisis in the world. According to United Nations officials, the humanitarian crisis is trapping Yemenis in a relentless downward spiral. They are pointing to famine, COVID-19, weak healthcare system, and the unabated war. The call for international diplomacy and aid is, at this moment, an urgent one. The country will go nowhere if no help comes to get Yemen out from war and anguish.
The International Organization for Migration said that the number of displaced Yemenis has increased due to the continuing war. The IMO said that there are 50,000 displaced in 13 governorates since the beginning of this year. According to the organization, more than 25,000 are displaced in Ma'rib since the start of 2021. The IOM puts the total number of displaced from Ma'rib at 1 million. The continuing war in Yemen has compounded this crisis of displacement in the country that suffers already from a number of difficulties. 20 million people require humanitarian assistance. More than 4 million Yemeni people are displaced, and many others need food supplies due to the deplorable economic situation. The following report has more details on this story.
In the vast arid desert between sand dunes with a temperature exceeding 40 degrees Celsius, more than 800 resident families and about 300 displaced families, most of them women and children, live in a very difficult humanitarian conditions. According to camps management for the displaced in Hajjah, more than 4,000 families, including 1,200 displaced families, face a humanitarian situation that is getting worse in light of the escalation of fighting between government forces and the Houthi rebels on the one hand, and the rising temperatures in the midst of a complete absence of international and humanitarian organizations on the other hand. Inside huts, tree branches and tents, ruined by high temperatures, winds and rains, the house of Muhammad al-Faidi, 72 years old, who has been displaced with his family from the city of Harad for more than 6 years, is lying on his traditional bed in one of the corners of the hut, which has not protected him from the high temperature for 3 years, causing him a disease made him lose his hearing. And near the hut of Muhammad al-Faidi lives 65 years old Fatima Ahmed, who was displaced with her 5 daughters from Abs district as a result of the ongoing conflict between government forces and the Houthi rebels. The International Organization for Migration announced the displacement of about 6,121 families, which is equivalent to 36,726 individuals since the beginning of this year as a result of the current war. And during June 2021, the displacement of 169 families was monitored, the organization added. Earlier, the Yemeni government held the Houthi rebels fully responsible for obstructing and thwarting efforts to achieve peace and stop the war, stressing at the same time that its hand will remain outstretched for peace. In a related context, Mark Lowcock warned from lack of funding and its impact on the provision of services to those in need, and noted that UNICEF in August will reduce fuel subsidies for water and sanitation systems serving 3.4 million people. Also, the World Health Organization announced the provision of the security limit of the package of services that provides health care for 6 million people. More than $200 million in pledges made at the March event have yet to be dispersed, including from some of Yemen's largest donors, Lowcock added. The suffering of the displaced Yemenis has worsened as a result of the nearly 7 years war, amid the deplorable economic situations that serves no good.
An international agency reported that Houthi rebels' returns out of the household natural gas equals to 100 billion riyal a year. According to this agency, the disparity between the official price of the gas cylinders and the price in the black market reaches 12,000 riyal for the cylinder. Worth mentioning, public services workers in Yemen have not received their salaries for 5 years in the Houthi-controlled areas. And the ratio of poverty tops 78% as to the total number of population in Yemen. The National Committee Against Coronavirus announced the registration of 33 new cases of the epidemic in 4 governorates. Committee officials said on Twitter that 14 cases were recorded in Hadramaut, 10 in Aden, 6 in Ma'rib, and 3 in Taiz. Also, 11 deaths were documented, 4 in Hadramaut, 3 in Aden, 3 in Ma'rib, and 1 in Lahj, plus 12 recovered cases, all in Aden. With the current updates, the total confirmed cases are 7,784, including 1,461 deaths and 4,797 cases of recovery. Additionally, Ministry of Health in Yemen announced the arrival of more than 150,000 doses of the American-made vaccine Johnson & Johnson. The ministry added that the doses that arrived to Aden airport are the first batch out of 504,000 donated to Yemen through the COVAX program, with the support of the United States Agency for International Development. Here is a reminder of the main headlines. In an unprecedented escalation, Houthi strikes target El Anad airbase. Joint forces managed to defend Houthi rebels' attacks in Hodeidah. Because of their constant obstruction to peace efforts, increasing international calls to isolate Houthi rebels. This is the end of the news. It was Rushain Fouad. Thank you for watching.